I have to bring up Leafs fan 34. And he does have kind of a point where he says, I love OverDrive, but I'm getting a little tired of tuning in and them talking like the Leafs are in 32nd place. Hyman talk and should have never traded Kadri and this and that and don't lose to Arizona. He's like, there's a pretty good – it's just things come up. If Hyman gets his 40th goal, it's difficult not to talk about him. I do understand your point where in this market things can get a little bit bonkers, and we might talk negative at the wrong times. Possibly we do that. Who knows? I don't feel like I do, but it's just hard.
Yeah, continue. All right.
It's hard not to talk about Hyman and Kadri and what's gone on in the past. You always say it. The past is the past, and stuff comes up, and you talk about it.
I would like to respond. Has he not listened to the show before where Austin Matthews gets a hat trick and we talk about him for 3 hours? Like, what the hell's he talking about?
Guys,
like,
I don't want to get mad at Leafs fan 34. I'm just bringing up the tweets.
Just relax. Like, we talk about Zach Hyman getting 40, and we have a good debate about it. We're moving on. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, if Matthews gets 3 tonight or something like that, and he's back on pace for whatever he is, he's still on pace for 70, we're talking about it. Like, there's lots of positivity. It drives me nuts. We're not allowed to speak anything or our opinion on it, or else all of a sudden, like, if we don't just sit there and backpat everything, it's like, oh, you guys are negative. That's not the truth. We're just talking about topical things. So that's my response.
Yeah, I respond the same way. I'm looking at the tweet right now. Shout out. We appreciate you listening and being a fan.
Yeah, give them love. We love you.
What I don't quite understand is...
Guys, I don't want to take
but let me quickly get to this. Again, I don't understand how us saying Hyman is amazing is some, like, subjective take. That's just an objective fact. The guy's been great. The Leafs better beat Arizona tonight. They've lost 13 in a row. They're maybe the worst team in the league or close to it.
Kind of just matter of fact.
Matter of fact, and Kadri has a lot of life and spunk. That's who he is. How does that relate to we're suggesting the Leafs are 32nd in the league? I don't understand.
You know what?
The connection
Screw this
between
guy. Whoever you are,
exactly.
Leafs fan
there
34.
You go. Now you're out. But that's not like us talking about other guys.
He's
has nothing to do with
writing that. Screw the guy. Forget it.
But again, they're not related. They're not mutually exclusive. There's no relation to our opinion on Hyman, Arizona, and Kadri to the way the Leafs are playing or how the Leafs are built.
I get it. It just maybe
There's no
thought maybe
comparison
we're
between
just
the
bringing
two.
up negative things.
I don't see it that way at all. I'll pump the tires of Hyman every day of the week. Kadri, I love Kadri. Arizona, you know where I stand on that. Arizona State University.
There's no disrespect, Arizona.
Exactly. Thank you, Bruce. I mean, they're totally separate conversations. And listen, you can't win them all. No one's going to bat 1,000. The fact is, I'm sure half the people think we're too hard on the Leafs. Half the people think we're too easy on the Leafs. And I think that's actually a pretty good testimonial. That means we're probably somewhere down the middle, and they play the games, and we respond. That's the way it goes. And I will stand by that. They better beat Arizona tonight. I think they will. I think Matthews rips home maybe 1 or 2. Maybe he gets back on the hat trick chain. I wouldn't be shocked. And what we haven't talked about today is Joseph Woll's getting the start tonight. And that is pretty substantial considering this guy's been out for a long, long time. And, you got some real games coming up with the Rangers on Saturday. You got the Bruins next Tuesday. You've only got so many games left until it's go time. It's March tomorrow. The playoffs begin on what, April 20th? Give or take. You have 6 weeks. Like, it's a 6-week sprint to the finish line. And I am really curious to see what he brings to the table tonight.
Right.
I think I was doing a SportsCenter hit the other day on it. Everyone's got a different viewpoint on what needs to be established by the Leafs between now and Game 1. And there's a lot of different things you can point to clearly. For me, it's the goaltender, though. Yeah, like, for me, it's who is your guy, right? Like, and hopefully he's here. I think he has to be here. I don't think they acquire anybody between now and next Friday. But is it Woll? Is it Samsonov? Right? Like, who's your guy? Because you want someone to exude confidence. You want someone in the crease going into Game 1 saying, this is my job. I own it. I'm not giving it up. I'll stand on my head if I have to. And I think that's It's the most important position in the sport. Like we can talk about who's going to play on the right side with Riley until we're blue in the face. We can discuss Domi flipping with Tavares. If you have a goalie that can't make stops, it's all irrelevant. Yeah, it's all irrelevant. You need a goaltender to be capable of giving you confidence. Here's Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. CJ, what do you make of Woll's return tonight, and what do you think the plan will be in the crease for the Leafs up until Game 1 of the playoffs?
I think so much of it is just going to revolve around how Joseph Woll plays, right? And he'd kind of been earning, I guess, the 1A starts, prior to his injury, but that was a long time ago, and he's faced a long road back. And, I'm sure, as you guys are aware, he doesn't have a lengthy NHL resume at this point as a young player looking to establish himself. And so, it's hard to say how this is going to play out. I think that your point's well made here is, before I came on, but in the Leafs case, I think they just need to feel they have, 1 out of 2 can get the job done. I mean, a lot of teams nowadays in the playoffs end up playing 2 goalies. A lot of teams that have won Stanley Cups have done it with 2 different goaltenders, winning them some big games along the way. And I think the short term is getting Joseph Woll comfortable again, seeing where he's at, making sure from a health standpoint that he can handle the workload. And then, as we get into sort of March and April, it'll be about determining, which of him or Samsonov is best suited to start the most important games once the playoffs start.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what he's got. Samsonov the other night, because of the Keefe show, we didn't talk a lot about it. But, he didn't have a great night afterwards. He just said, I want to get some rest. Like, you're around him a lot, CJ. Yeah. Does he have a different kind of aura to him, Elias Samsonov, since he returned from, that 2-week, sabbatical he was on?
Tough to say. I think what I really like about the guy is he's honest. And I do think at times he's been almost a bit immune to his situation. I'm thinking more to last year. He just didn't seem like being the Leafs goaltender, being the player they're rolling out in the biggest games was affecting him. I think he's had obviously a much different campaign this year, but it's hard to argue with the results since he's been back after having that break. And it's sure it doesn't look good against Vegas. Certainly a couple of those goals aren't his best work, but I think for the last 3 weeks you've seen a lot of good there. So. Ultimately, I do believe this is going to be a tandem. As I mentioned, I think a lot of teams now are going to win a cup using 2 goalies. And so Toronto isn't necessarily unusual in that regard. I mean, frankly, I could see a world where Martin Jones is playing a playoff game. It's probably going to take, one of the 2 either being injured or really underperforming for that to happen, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And, it wasn't that long ago Pittsburgh did that in a playoff round. In the first round, they used 3 different goalies. So, I think this is a bit of the new reality, and the Leafs are kind of the normal in that case, but I can understand why it's going to give us a lot to talk about and fans a lot to fret about, because it's just not like going into the playoffs with Martin Brodeur in his prime, or even Andrei Vasilevsky in his prime. What he used to give Tampa gave them a lot of confidence, and obviously when they won those 2 cups back to back, he played every single minute of those playoff runs, and you kind of knew what you were getting. I think there's a little bit more of a feel of unpredictability here because of where both the fact that Woll is young and the fact that Samsonov has had some significant ups and downs this season.
CJ, you see Chris Tanev get traded. You hear the rumblings that the Leafs were in on him, or maybe a close second type of thing. Like
right into the end. Right
into the end. What do you make of the Leafs being in on that, and then where do you think they turn their attention to?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, most teams viewed among the rental defensemen available, Chris Tanev, the best option at right D. He was right up at the top, or at the very top, or near the top of the trade bait board since November. And, we all know what the Leafs, biggest need or desire to fill at the deadline is, and he would have filled it. So, I think all that kind of lines up. And I just wonder if there was going to be sort of a Toronto tax on him ever getting pried out of Calgary. It seems like the price the Leafs were being asked to pay ended up being, quite a bit more than where the deal ended up. And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, starting with the fact that I know the draft, the prospect they got in that trade. It's not just about the second round pick they got back from Dallas and trading Tanev away. But, I think for Toronto, it seems as though any right defense from that right side,
All right, we'll throw you on we got to throw you on hold, CJ. Your phone's going in and out. Yeah, well, just Doogie, pick it up, see if we can get him in a better spot. But it's interesting, like the tax, right? Like, I wonder if the Leafs probably, I don't know. I'm sure they feel one way or the other. But if that's the case, then just you got to scratch them off the list. Like,
don't
it
even
sucks.
call him.
Yeah.
But don't even call him.
Probably it would start from an owner. Like an owner would go down and say,
Right.
"Don't even think about dealing with Tree. Like, we're not just here to say, oh, here's your old player." Maybe it's an owner that I would
Right.
bet it would be an owner that would go down there and say, "Don't even think about it. Not on my watch."
Yeah.
That is a realistic possibility.
Absolutely. And if that's the case, then you work with 30 teams in the league, not 31. Like, that's just the nature. And guess what? If Calgary calls in the future, you say, no, thank you. Right? If the roles are reversed in 3 or 4 years, although I don't know if you need to be vindictive. I'm not sure that's smart for business, quite frankly. I think you should probably just do whatever you think is best for the team. But you're dealing with relationships. You're dealing with people. Yeah, I don't think Craig Conroy would personally establish something like that. That seems silly. I mean, he worked with Tree. I'm sure he's close with Tree. But if the owner makes a call, the owner makes a call. You got to abide by that, right?
Well, and not to mention, you look at what went for Tanev. The Leafs don't have a second rounder like
Right.
that. And he wasn't going to go to you don't go to a first just because you don't have a second. You're not going to bump it up. So if you don't have that currency that player ends up garnering, then you got to move past it. Right. Obviously, the Leafs didn't have the offer that Dallas did.
CJ, you got us back. You were talking about a possibly perceived, Leaf tax out in Calgary, and we're suggesting that if that's the case, the Leafs just need to scratch them off the list. Stop calling them. Stop working with Calgary. If that's the way they want to operate, and move on to someone else. The question is, what might that be? Like, where do the Leafs go from here? If Tanev was a guy that they really liked, on the trade bait board, I'm not seeing anyone that really matches the same qualifications right now. Okay.
Yeah,
and we've lost.
All right. Yeah, I just okay. We'll see if we can get CJ back.
It's on the mute button now.
That's probably what it was, a mute malfunction. A mute malfunction.
I come back to you need right-handed shots. Like that's this team needs a right-handed shot that can play in your top 4. That's really what. But who is available? Like, that isn't a shrub.
Nobody on the list. That's the thing. Like, Carrier's a good defenseman. Sean Walker's good. Labushkin's a big right shot defenseman. But if you're talking like top 4 means if need be you can play in the top pair and not look out of place. None of those guys, I think, fit that qualification. And the other guys, they might be able to skate and make plays like a top 4, but they're not big guys. Like, Walker's not a big guy. Carrier's not a big guy. And maybe they just need to accept that. Like, maybe this trade deadline, there's only so much you can do, and you got to get to the summer to overhaul things, right? Because Brody's going to be up. McCabe, I believe, is up. He might have one more year. Giordano's going to be up. There's going to be room on defense to move pieces around and either acquire via trade or free agency and try to find the size and physicality I think Tree Living would be seeking. But you can't create something that's not there, right? If those players aren't available, they're not available. And the Leafs would not be alone. I'm sure there's a lot of teams in the league that would love to pry, some guy who's 6'2", 6'3", with some size, some physicality, some snarl, right shot. It's a unicorn in the league.
But that's what it is. Like, the guy I like and who's got some snarl, can fight, makes $775,000, shoots left though. Nick Seeler, like he's got bite. He's a third pairing guy. He can fight. He plays in Philadelphia, but I know he plays on the right side. But he's a left shot, and I just don't know if you need to add another left shot. He's 6'2", 200, but he's tough as nails. Like,
I wonder if there's any depth guys in the league that are like 6'5". Like, the guy right winger that just says, you know what, maybe this summer I'm going to transfer in I'm going to pull a Brent Burns and become a D-man. If I can be a smooth skating D-man that can get the puck out of the zone, maybe think about it, man.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Maybe you're right. Maybe it's like a, left-handed reliever. It's a great field goal kicker. Like, you can just have a great career. It'll last for a while.
How many times, you just said it, Hayes, a big physical, tough, right-handed D-man. Like, if some guy is not happy with his ice time as a right winger, I'm a D-man next year.
I just declare I'm a defenseman now.
That's it.
I mean, they're out there. It's just the teams that have him, you're not looking to give them up. All right, you want to try one more time, or are we going back to the well?
Man.
This is it. We're trying it one more time. Chris Johnston, CJ, do you have us?
I've got you. Do you have me?
We have you, CJ. All right. So
this is a good test run for the deadline. I cannot be having phone problems a week out from the deadline.
That's right. You're right. I think that's a positive spin on this. We need to make sure everything is 5G, man. You cannot be 2G, 3H, whatever it happens to be. You got to make sure you're on top of things by next Friday. So where are we going next here? If Tanev's obviously off the board, any names that you feel comfortable suggesting the Leafs are at least kicking tires on right now?
Yeah, I think Lyubushkin in Anaheim is one that they're at least still in on at this point in time. Obviously, some familiarity there with a guy that had been here a couple of years ago. I think Matt Dumba, who will be playing here tonight on the Arizona end of things, is someone the Leafs have at least expressed some interest in. It's hard to get a read on exactly, identifying one favorite target. I mean, I think it was fair to call Tanev that prior to him being dealt to Dallas. And, now it's about, what's the best player they can get in with the use of the assets. And, I heard you guys mentioning there, not having a second round pick for about 22 years is going to be a bit of a challenge, because obviously the Leafs are not going to give up their first rounder just for anything. And the fact that the Stars were able to make that deal for Tanev without surrendering her first rounder, probably doesn't say good things to the teams that are out there selling defensemen right now. So, it might be a bit of a grind for Toronto, but those are two names I think that are fair. I do know they've called it various times in the past on Walker out of Philly, Carrier in Nashville, although I don't think the Predators are as likely to move him now. And so we'll see if anything else shakes loose, or maybe someone ends up on the trade market that hasn't been there since November as we get closer to March 8th. But those are kind of some of the names that the Leafs are around at this point in time.
CJ, is there any news with Carolina and Brett Pesce? I think he's unrestricted coming up, and that was kind of a name that was bandied about, at the starting of the season, is what is Carolina going to do with him? And
what about this one, Noodles?
I haven't heard his name.
Own rental. Remember that little phrase? Maybe he's their own rental. Woo!
Well, look, I think he is an own rental in Carolina, but, they're an organization that does things differently. I know they made a pitch to give an extension to Brett Pesce last summer. The two sides didn't see the world even remotely the same way. It wasn't a long conversation. It wasn't a lot of back and forth. And as far as I know, I don't think they've rekindled it between now and then. So I would suggest he'll probably be one of the top names when it comes time to do the free agent board, because I think it's, signs point to him likely hitting the market on July 1st. But, I think with where the Hurricanes are at, they're not in a mindset to take a valuable piece off their team. I think they're looking to add.
With Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider, where are we at with Elias Pettersson? Where, earlier in the week it was he's not answering calls, he's not interested in negotiating, he'll see you in the summer, and now all of a sudden there's an 8-year deal that's being worked out? What happened here, and how close could we be talking about, an actual extension happening for Pettersson in Vancouver?
Well, I don't think we should get too far ahead of ourselves with an 8-year deal. What happened, though, is they started talking, and that's, for me, the real news nugget there is that after a season where Elias Pettersson had no interest in having his agents have those discussions and negotiations going on, he just thought it would be a distraction in the background. I think it was becoming a pretty distraction in the foreground, the fact he wasn't having the talks. And so Tuesday night, Wednesday, the Canucks and his agent have engaged. But the sense I'm getting is that it's likely to be a situation where a variety of terms are considered. Longer terms. I don't mean a 2-year deal, but and we'll see where they end up. But there's clearly a high degree of urgency from the Canucks end of this to get a deal done. I think that's where some of the stories were emanating from. In a sense, is that they were curious or wondering why this was on ice, and with the deadline coming up and with the season the team's having, I think they want to remove that distraction, and so they're taking a strong run now at signing Pettersson, and we'll see if they're able to finally conclude that. But I don't get the sense it's happening today, and I don't think it's a 100% guarantee it's an 8-year deal. But obviously players of his stature, if you're going to lock in long term, it usually makes sense to go the full 8 years and take the guaranteed money. And it's obviously going to be a big payday for him if it ends up being an 8-year contract.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that, he's having such a good year. Vancouver's having such a good year, and now it's a distraction. Like,
I know.
Where, you know what I mean? Like, why would it not have been a distraction earlier in the year? And I would assume, I don't know this, but my guess would be it's the Canucks leaking that he's not talking. So if that's the case and he's struggling with that, are they not responsible for the issues? Like, why did it have to get out right now that he's not negotiating? Like, it's a big story because the Canucks want him to come to the table, and it's public, I would, again, presume, CJ, because they've made it public, via the grapevine.
Yeah, I don't know the source of all the leaks because, they're not all coming through my sources. But, I think that in general, it's sort of a weird one because he is a restricted free agent next year. So this wasn't like Nylander and the Leafs before they got his deal done in January where there was a possibility, William could have been going to any team that wanted to bid a lot of money on July 1st. I mean, he's Canucks property, under team control through next season. So, I don't fully understand the urgency. I mean, I can understand the desire when you have a player with that talent to get him signed, to know what the number is, to get it locked in, to remove any questions. But, the way this has gone down, I mean, usually players aren't of the same mind as Pettersson. I think he's taken sort of a stance that you don't normally see, but he's been consistent about it. I mean, he gave interviews last summer where he basically said, I don't want to talk contract during the season. And until this week, I think he's been consistent in sticking to that. But, it just became such a sideshow in Vancouver with all kinds of stories with, the Canucks taking calls on him, which I believe happened. But, I don't think by any sense were they likely to trade him, whether there's a deal in place or not. But I think now they're at least going to see if they see the world the same way, if they can, reach a contract. And obviously that'll settle things down long before the playoffs if it happens.
With Chris Johnston, Winnipeg's made a deal. Vancouver's made a deal. The Leafs and Edmonton are the two Canadian teams going to the playoffs who have not. We've talked a lot about Toronto, but where does Edmonton come into play here between now and next Friday?
Well, they're one of the main teams we should be focused on. I mean, I think certainly they're committed to trading their first-round pick as part of a contract, as part of getting one of the significant players out there. I think that they're really targeting the forward position for an upgrade. It's not to say they won't also maybe make some kind of upgrade to their blue line, but specifically, I think they'd like to add someone who can play inside their top six. Maybe line up on Leon Draisaitl's wing and have Connor McDavid be on his own line and really load up in that way. And so, it feels like they've been around everyone, whether it's Pavel Buchnevich, some talk maybe Tyler Toffoli could be of interest to them here with the possibility New Jersey will move on from him, although I don't think the Devils have reached the point where they've committed to trading him out of town, but it's definitely becoming a possibility with them kind of distant in the wild card chase. Edmonton, I think will be, pretty aggressive in terms of getting one of the big wingers or maybe even a center on the market. Jake Gensel, I think could make sense for them. But certainly if we don't see anything happen before March 8th, that'll be one of the main teams I can be sure we'll be talking about when the coverage starts at Trade Center, because I just don't see them letting this deadline pass without, making some kind of meaningful acquisition to their team. It's just given the season they've had, given, you've only got 2 more years of guaranteed, McDavid and Draisaitl together. I mean, this is a big year in Edmonton, and I don't think they're going to let this deadline pass quietly.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, why not at this point? And we'll see. I mean, again, like Toffoli's an interesting one. He's such a good player. And Jersey's an interesting team. Like, there's those teams just on the outside in the East, CJ, like Pittsburgh. And obviously Gensel would be at the top of the list. Gensel's a game changer. Like, you pick up a guy like Gensel, you're really, really happy, but you got to pay a big price if Toffoli's there. I don't know if the Islanders are in a position to do that. Philly is still in the playoffs, yet sounds like Danny Briere and company are willing to trade. Like, that portion of the Eastern Conference really could make or break what happens in the next 7 or 8 days in terms of which of those teams. I'd throw Washington in there too. Like, are they going to go for it or are they going to sell? Like, how do we know at this point?
Yeah, it's the weirdest deadline in a long time that I remember, because basically the quality of it will probably be determined by if some of those teams decide to sell that are what we might call bubble teams, or, could go either way at this point in time, just because the teams at the very bottom of the standings have been selling for years, right? I mean, Montreal, Anaheim, San Jose, all these players, these teams have traded significant players off their roster in the last couple of seasons at the deadline, and they just don't have a whole lot left. It's not to say they aren't going to still trade a few more bodies out of town, but we're not talking about the same kind of impact players that might be available on a few of those teams that are closer to the bubble. And, to me, a team like Seattle will be fascinating. I know we don't focus on them or talk about them a lot, but they have a ton of UFAs, whether it's Alex Wenberg, Jordan Eberle, Thomas Tatar, Justin Schultz. And, I think at this point in time, they're inclined not to sell if they feel like they can make it. But, maybe 2 or 3 losses between now and March 8th and the view changes and, they could be putting some more players out there. And so if you're James Duthie right now, you're cheering for some of those bubble teams to go decidedly sour the next week. It's where they have, internally they have some clear direction of which way they want to go. Because otherwise it might just be this strange deadline where there wasn't a lot of sellers ultimately that were there willing to flood the market and give us lots of content.
Well, we'll see what comes of it, CJ. We're inching closer and closer, 8 days away from go time. Make sure that phone is ready to rock come next week, man. Thank you for doing this.
All right, talk soon, boys.
There's Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com.
Who's the one team you're going to be looking outside of the market of Toronto? Because my team is Pitt. Like, they've had some wins lately, but...
Yeah, they can be a real... I'm with you, man. Like, they can be a real game changer. You put Gensel out there. They've got a couple of other depth players.
And I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do that.
They'll get slaughtered in the first round.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Like, if they get in, they're playing like Florida, Boston, or the Rangers in the first round. They're going to be a heavy underdog. I think, Gensel's an obvious one. I wonder if they put Riley Smith back out there. Other guys have long-term, there's a lot of guys with term on that team, though, that I don't know who they're going to trade. Lars Eller. Anyway, I'm with you on Pitt. I think Philly's still going to be active, and that's going to be fascinating because they're in the playoffs, and they've been in it all year. Like, they've been in the playoffs all year. Do they still have the stomach to trade guys and commit to the future? That can be very difficult to do. And I do wonder if any of those teams on the outside looking in decide, screw it, we're going for it. And I think that team would be the Islanders. Like, they just fired their coach and brought in Patrick Waugh. I could see Lou saying, screw it, we're going to trade assets and try to get in.
He might not have a choice. That might be his last gasp.
Yeah.
Well, and Patrick might say to him, that might have been one of the deals they made when Patrick signed there, is Lou would say, I'm going to give you some assets heading into the deadline to make this team better. I'm circling Seattle. Like, I look at Adam Larson. Adam Larson might be interesting. He's got one more year at $4 million. Like, there's your right shot defenseman who can play in your top four, who's big and mean. Like, that guy hits and advances the puck. Pretty solid player. Yeah.
That might cost you. That's probably going to cost you a decent price, though, right, Noodles?
It will. You're going to pay for a top four defenseman. It's going to cost you.
Yes,
I don't know what that. If it's a second rounder, if they've Tanev, but if there's term, that might cost you a first rounder.
The second rounder in 2030.
They don't. Well, that's it, man. They don't have one for a few years.
Yeah. But it's a grind. But you got to look at players throughout the league, and Seattle's an interesting one because if they don't think they're going to make it, like, they're going to have to make decisions here in the next 7-8 days. So.
Yeah, that's a good point too, man. There's teams like that on the West too. Barry Trotz, his first year as the GM. What's he going to do in Nashville? Is he just going to keep going? Is he going to add? Is he going to sell? Is he going to stand pat? There's a lot of teams on that bubble that could have a big impact on what happens between now and next Friday. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Doug, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan, our boy Carlo Koliakovo coming up in about a half an hour. He's doing panel work tonight. Carlo will join us. A little round table. Leafs Arizona tonight. Bunch of good games in the NHL. His take on McDavid's OT winner last night. Zach Hyman at 40 goals. Might have to get his take on Vladdy Guerrero Jr. as well, because I guess Vladdy was speaking today to Hector Gomez.
What's he saying? Tell me.
All right, here's what Vladdy had to say. Quote, he was asked about the negotiation, the arbitration, right? And he said, I have no grudge. I'm assuming this was in Spanish and then obviously translated to English. I have no grudge against the Blue Jays, despite the tense negotiations I had with the team during the salary arbitration. It's just business. I would like to be a Blue Jay for the rest of my career, but the team has not made me an offer. So
that's not everything's cool. Trust me.
You don't see it that way?
No, I really don't. There's no possible way that you can walk out of an arbitration hearing and still be just, oh yeah, everything's hunky-dory after the things you heard. And the last comment means there's a lot of guys that I'm better than, and although last year was a down season, that have been throwing monster contracts in their pockets. But
right. And
when you say that, like there's been no contract offer, that's just a little jab too, where it's like not an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I think it's a scenario here where the Jays are not fully committed to paying him probably the money he feels he has earned at this point, or certainly will deserve in the future. This is the crux of the issue with Vladdy, is he had that monster season a few years ago, and since then his numbers have been good, not great. Like, if you have good numbers, you're going to get paid a lot of money in baseball, no question. He also is worth a lot based on marketability. He's the face of the team. And he's young. And his prime is likely in front of him, or he's probably in the midst of it now, but he should have 3, 4, 5 more really good years in front of him. But if he's looking for something like 350, 400, I can understand why the Jays don't justify that, or can't justify that, or can't trust that he's going to reach those levels of production because of what they've seen the last 2 years. So, he's in a position where he's making good money. He just won his arbitration case. Right? He comes from money. His dad's in the Hall of Fame. His dad made a lot of money. He's probably comfortable with sitting there saying, I'll play it out, and I'm going to show you that this is the money I deserve. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Jays have sniffed that out. And they're like, why would we? There's no negotiation if Vladdy is only going to accept $350 million, or whatever it is he's willing to accept right now, because it takes two to tango. And even though he's saying it, well, they haven't offered me anything, I'd be surprised if they haven't sniffed around to get a read on what he'd be willing to accept.
No kidding. And
right?
if I'm talking about 300 plus, I don't want to see it like a couple years ago, the 1 year. I want to see it. I want to know what I'm getting for that cat. I don't want to have question marks. I don't want to have question marks about consistency. I don't want to have question marks about falling asleep at second base at a massive game. I don't want to have question marks about fitness. I don't want to have any questions if I'm handing out that kind of money.
But they do. That's the reason why. Like, that's the reason why he doesn't have that giant contract in his pocket, is there's probably some question marks of what is this guy once he's hit his ceiling, or has he hit his ceiling? Was the outlier the first season? I don't believe so. I think there is more there once he continues to mature and kind of get it on all different facets. But they haven't seen enough of it to make that commitment. That's being a shrewd manager.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, it could burn them. This is the thing about a negotiation. It could burn them. He could go off this year and then say, all right, now it's $400 million, $450. Right? He could go off the next 2 years and say, you guys were too late to the party. I'm out of here. I'm signing somewhere else. And that's the gamble you take if you don't commit to this guy. But the reason you don't commit to him at this point, if you're the Blue Jays, is because of everything you guys have just said and the questions that are out there. The thing is, in pro sports, though, there's a history of guys just getting it based on talent, based on possible ceiling or projection. And with Vladdy, like, he still plays like a kid. Like that getting picked off at second base in game 2, that's one of the most embarrassing plays in the big leagues.
There's no question. It's that moment, like if you do that on a sleepy night in Kansas City and when you're crushing them, that's one thing. But in that moment, to be sleeping like that, that's crazy, man.
Like crazy. And then you're going to say, now he's learned from that? I don't know. Like, I can understand the hesitation, but they're playing with fire. Like, it could burn them. It really could. Now, if it burns them based on paying him more money, so be it. I don't care if the owners have to spend more money to keep him. If he proves this year that he's worth it, give it to him. But if they start messing around and there is an issue, regardless of what he's saying publicly, with the arbitration that he didn't like, if he feels disrespected, if he feels like they're not pot committed to him, and then he goes off the next 2 years and goes, screw it, I'm out, that is going to be impossible to overcome. Like from a Shapiro-Atkins standpoint, this is a massive game of poker. Because if he goes off and then walks and then leaks, well, it's because they wouldn't pay me or they weren't interested in negotiating, these guys are gone. They can't stick around. They'll never overcome that. And they're aware of it. They're not stupid guys. Like Shapiro and Atkins are well aware that if they don't sign him and he walks and he turns into an MVP caliber player every single year, that they're never going to redeem themselves.
What's the opposite? And they hand over the bag.
That's
and
the owner
and then it
gets
just
rid of
doesn't translate.
Yeah, that's the conundrum. Like that's why those guys get paid what they get paid. Talking about the front office guys, and that's why you got to have faith that you hire the right people. Like if you're an owner of a pro sports team, you have to have full faith that your management team knows what they're doing. Because if they don't, you're screwed. You know, it's a real conundrum, and contract negotiations and when to pay someone, how much to pay someone. It's the core evaluation of any GM, how they handled it. And everyone's going to get things wrong. But with Vladdy, this is a massive one because of what he represents and who he is. Wow. And he sells tickets, man. They just invested $350 million or whatever it is to the Dome. He's the guy that's supposed to sell the tickets. Vladdy's the guy. So
I honestly thought after that big season he had, Hayes, that's when they were going to just say, we got to lock this guy up.
Right.
Like the Acuna deal had just happened for $100 million. I thought they were going to try to sniff around and say, let's see if he'll take something similar. He probably would have.
But
my
I don't know.
Tatis signed that monster in San Diego. That's probably what he was looking for. Go ahead, Noodles.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, what if he did sign that? What if they did lock him up to a monster deal? And he's produced the last couple seasons coming off that massive. What would we be talking about?
Right.
Like where he's had still immaturity. Like we would say, what the hell did you give him all that money after one season? So I think it is the chicken or the egg when it comes to it. I still think if he ends up in the next year or two, like going out and just dominating or getting back to that level, yeah, he's going to get paid. But he's willing to sign a long-term deal right now. Why wouldn't he be willing to sign a long-term deal, maybe for more money? He just has to put their feet to the fire if he goes out and earns it. Like, I think there's still a happy medium here that works out for everybody. Yeah, that's going to cost them more money, but at least they know exactly what they have in this player. Because to be honest, like you ask baseball people, what is he? What is Vladdy? Like, what is his ceiling or what is he right now? A lot of them can't tell you. They're like, well, he hits for power. He's got the... But what is he? Like, where's his comparable? That's my question.
The ultimate question. You're right, Noodles. I mean, and everyone's got a different viewpoint, and that's what makes it very difficult to negotiate with. I think if you're a Blue Jay fan and if you're the Blue Jays, what you hope is truthful in these statements is that he wants to stay here, that he wants to be a Blue Jay the rest of his career, because then even if he is bitter about the arbitration, he's not going to let that on. Even if he is being a little bit deceptive with, well, they haven't offered me anything. Well, maybe you gave them an indication you didn't want that, or were only willing to accept something, or whatever. Like it can be a half truth, but if it is a full blown truth that he loves it here and wants to stay here, if he blows up, they're going to pay him. They're going to keep him, and that'd be a great sign. But they need him this year, man. Like they needed him last year, they really need him this year.
Dude, any kind of offensive response for the whole organization, it starts and ends with that guy.
That's right. Yeah, he's got to be the man. He and Bichette. And Bichette's in the same spot. Bo's up in 2 years, too. They're on the same path, man. Their deals come up at the same time. Like, you got 2 years. We talked about it. McDavid and Draisaitl. You only guarantee 2 more years, right, with each of them in Edmonton. What are you going to do? The same thing here with these two guys. Doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the road, but it could be. And, these are big platform years for the two of them. They're in their primes now, man. They got skin in the game, as we always say. So we'll see what comes of it. And I guess Vladdy had a pretty good day, I believe, down in Dunedin today. A couple of doubles and looking pretty good. Looks like he's in shape. Everything's moving in the right direction for Vladdy Guerrero Jr.
When's our boy Manoah back on the bump?
Well, I guess do the math. Probably in a couple of days. Yeah, I would guess. I haven't looked at their schedule and, if they have any split starts or
do the math.
Squad games.
I want to hear the sounding like Keegan. What was it?
Loud doubles.
Loud doubles.
Loud doubles.
Unfortunately, I don't hate watch or like looking at the car act. I have to watch when next time he's on the mound to see what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. I'm just like, I don't know. I guess it's just part of it is I like seeing what athletes got inside. Like, can this guy find this? And just the intrigue of it. I have to watch him, man, on the mound. I don't know.
I don't think this is hyperbole. It is possibly the most anticipated spring training start in Blue Jay history. It really
Without
is.
question. Whoever our next baseball guest is, that'll be my question. Is his next start the most anticipated start in Blue Jays history of spring training?
Yeah. I think
because it has to be.
It has to be. I mean, you could go back maybe to the Ricky Romero years where he was struggling.
No way, man.
I don't think this is on
level.
Steroids. I agree. This is on steroids. This has gotten way more coverage. What he did his first time out, now every time he rolls it over, it becomes like you got to track a spring training start. Or even if he pitches well, he's going to go like 3 innings and get pulled anyway. There's a pitch count on the guy. But, yeah, that's going to be big. That'll be big. Well, more on that as we get closer to it. All right, Carlos coming up. Koliakovo will join us around the table in about 25 minutes. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, Carlo Koliakovo coming up in about 15 minutes. We're always tracking Twitter, Instagram, seeing what's coming in, text, email, and we have Catherine tweeting in asking if we can possibly supply her with an emergency Deer Hazy B today.
I saw that.
So maybe we do that in the next hour. We'll see. Generally, that's reserved.
Do you know the context of what we need to help out with?
Yeah, it's about she's going to the game, I guess, on Saturday. They're driving down. I'm not sure where they live. They
8 hours.
Yeah, it's like an 8-hour drive. And anyway, we will get to it because now we've referenced it. We can't do this to Catherine. We've got to hook her up. We'll do it next hour, a little emergency Deer Hazy B. Usually we're only certified at 6:30 on Fridays.
Our license says that. We have to call somebody to get permission to use our doctorate license helping people on a Thursday.
Yeah, we don't want malpractice here. We don't want to lose our license, but we'll see if we can make this work in the next hour. All right, Catherine is seeking out help, and we understand why, right? We're here to help people. Every day we announce a current or former Maple Leaf player, and every Friday you can call in, name the Maple Leaf lineup of the week, and you go see a future Leaf game. This week we're giving away Leafs Bruins March 4th, plus throwing in a $250 Vanilla Visa prepaid card. Vanilla Visa prepaid cards are available for purchase at Petro-Canada. Today's player of the day is Travis Green. Travis Green.
Wow.
There you go. Greeny's down at Jersey, right? He's down there on the bench in Jersey, and he's obviously a Maple Leaf alumni and former Canucks head coach. And
friend of the show.
Friend of the show, yeah. We haven't had Greeny on since he got back in the game behind the bench.
That guy would sit at a card.
Him, right?
Oh, yeah. He would sit at the card table right in front of me, and he won every time. And I'm just like, how does a guy win every time? Like, we're all getting handed cards. And he would just be raking, and it would be... Yeah, it was. I've never seen anything like it. I'm like, how could a guy be better at poker? You either get the cards or not. But he just, I don't know, man. It would just be like,
shark.
I don't know what the hell it was, but it was like 3-6 is up on the flop, and this guy's got a 3 and a 6 in his hand, and then like he's got a full every time. It was. I never seen anything like it. I can't imagine what like playing against a heavy hitter Texas Hold'em player was like, because he just rinsed everyone.
Yeah.
Every time. I felt like I was taken advantage of.
That is the worst when you're playing a guy. It's like a
golfer. Dude, it's
$1,000
every time you chip in, and he's raking in $5,000. It's like, what the hell? Like
it's almost like a sandbagger. It's like a poker playing.
It was a side job. It was a side job.
Yeah. That's disappointing.
He played in the World Series of Poker. Like, he's literally a professional. Like, he knows what he's doing. Like, so he was rinsing all the pigeons on the plane, guaranteed.
Yeah. And
like,
sorry, it wasn't
cheating.
$1,000. Everybody, there was like 7 guys playing, and it was everyone just tossed in a hunch for a quick.
Right.
But you win
like
a couple hands
or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You win a couple hands on the way to Long Island. You would throw $1,000 in your pocket. It's nice work.
Greeny's just absolutely destroying the boys every single flight. Yeah, that's where you get a shark like that, man. You got to avoid him. Can't do it. Can't have it.
Yeah.
But Travis Green is your Maple Leaf player of the day. All right.
Love it.
Yeah. Leafs Arizona tonight. Carlos coming up. We'll get to that. We'll get to our leap year bit. You're going to want to hear this around 6:30. Got to touch on LeBron and his greatness. Credit where it's due, man. He outscored the Clippers in the fourth quarter last night. He's 39 years old. He had 16 in the fourth. The Clippers had 14 in the fourth quarter. He's averaging 25-7-7, and he's 39 years old. Like it's just remarkable what he's doing. It's absolutely remarkable. Like, speaking of outscoring opponents, I saw it last night, a stat. 18th time in his career that LeBron has outscored the entire opposing team in the fourth quarter. No other active NBA player has done it more than 3 times.
Wow.
Just staggering, like, what he's doing. And that's the Clippers. Clippers have been great. Kawhi was playing. Like, they're all good. And the Lakers, they come back from a 21-point deficit. And that's why they're terrifying. The idea of playing the Lakers, playing Golden State, they're starting to get going. Someone's going to get them in the play-in. And it could be
I wouldn't want either one of them, man.
I wouldn't want either one of them either. I would prefer to avoid that. All right, Carlos coming up. Final hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050, soon to be up on TSN 2.